Here are the reasons why you wouldn't live long in ancient China, starting with the spine-chilling and heading straight for the downright horrifying. We're uncovering the brutal realities of ancient life. The Great Wall of Death. So you think the Great Wall of China is just a cool, ancient Instagram backdrop? Think again. It's more like a monument to misery and mass graves. Yup, if you were living in ancient China, you might have ended up as part of its foundation. Literally. Flashback to 221 BC, and Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of unified China, decides it's time to keep those pesky northern invaders at bay. His genius plan? Connect a bunch of existing walls into one colossal defensive barrier, the Great Wall of China. Easy, right? Well, not so much. There wasn't a spare army of builders just hanging around, waiting to be called up for wall duty. So what does Emperor Qin do? He orders General Meng Tian to draft a massive army of laborers. And guess what? That includes soldiers, convicts, farmers, and yup, you guessed it, regular old commoners like you. You're in the crew as well. Imagine you're chilling in your village, minding your own business, maybe hiding under your bed when soldiers storm in, rounding everyone up. You're dragged from your home and hauled off to the northern frontier. Now you're stuck building this massive wall under hellish conditions. Long hours, blazing sun, little food, and zero comfort. The tools? Primitive. The terrain? Brutal. And each stone you lift feels like it's breaking your back. And here's the kicker. If you drop dead from exhaustion or were crushed under a pile of rocks, your body didn't get a respectful burial. Nope, you just became part of the wall. Literally. The nightmare doesn't end there. Long hours, scorching heat, constant attacks from nomadic tribes, every day was a new level of hell. Keep digging, the Emperor wants this done by next century. Oh, fantastic. Nothing like impossible deadlines to motivate the soul. I can't wait to tell my grandkids. What did you do, Grandpa? Oh, this became part of the world's biggest tourist trap. The death toll? Staggering. Around 400,000 laborers died building this thing. Many were buried right in the wall. So the next time you see tourists grinning for selfies on the Great Wall, remember they're posing on the world's longest gravestone. The coup that killed millions. Ever think about what it'd be like to time travel to the Ming Dynasty? Maybe you're imagining silk robes, serene gardens, and grand palaces, right? Wrong. You're more likely to end up as a corpse in the chaos than living a fairy tale. Let's rewind to the mid-17th century. The Ming Dynasty, once the heavyweight champion since 1368, is on life support. From the outside, it looks solid, like a well-fortified fortress. Peek inside, though, and it's total chaos. The government's a joke, corruption is the national sport, and famine is the national pastime, ensuring no one's having a good time. Now imagine you're a peasant. No, you don't get to be the emperor, you're in the mud, struggling to survive. Your crops have failed, your family's starving, and finding hope is like finding a clean public restroom. Impossible. Then along comes the self-proclaimed Shun Emperor, promising to overthrow the corrupt Ming rulers and save the day. With nothing to lose, you and many desperate souls join his cause. Because hey, what else could go wrong? Spoiler alert, everything. Fast forward to the bloodbath, hundreds of thousands dead, but the Shun forces conquer Beijing. And you're in the thick of it, probably missing an arm by now. The last Ming emperor, instead of facing capture, hangs himself in the imperial gardens. You might think, phew, glad that's over. Nope, not even close. It's like thinking the work week is over on Wednesday. You see, the fall of Beijing is just a warm-up act for an even bigger nightmare. Ming loyalists aren't going down without a fight. One General Wu decides to make a deal with the devil, the Manchus, longtime enemies of the Ming. He offers them the entire country if they help crush the Shun. The Manchus agree, because who wouldn't want a slice of that chaos pie? So, we're teaming up with our enemies to fight our other enemies? Yep, because the only thing worse than one enemy is two enemies. And when this is over, what then? Back to being enemies? Of course, it's the circle of life. And death. Mostly death. What follows is a nightmare of epic proportions. Caught in the middle of this power struggle, you face threats from every direction. You're dodging sword slashes and cannon fire, screaming for dear life in a war zone. Welcome to your new life. Whoops, there goes your leg. Now you're down to one arm and one leg. Perfect. By 1644, the Qing dynasty, led by the Manchus, take control of Beijing. But peace? Forget it. Southern China and Taiwan rebel against Qing authority, teaming up with Ming loyalists. For nearly 40 more years, an apocalyptic war rages across the land. It takes until 1683, nearly 40 years of non-stop war, for the Qing to finally establish control over the entire nation. By then, nearly 25 million people are dead. Yup, 25 million. Think you're surviving this war, hopping around on one leg and an arm? Maybe in another lifetime, buddy. Mind-breaking exam. We're talking about an exam so soul-crushing that failing it wasn't just your problem, it was the whole village's catastrophe. Welcome to ancient China, where the dreaded Jinshi exam was a fast track to insanity and an early grave. Let's travel back to the Tang Dynasty, between the 7th and 10th centuries, when moving up the social ladder required more than just a fancy resume. The imperial bigwigs devised this monstrous exam system to sniff out the best brains for their bureaucracy. Meet the Jinshi exam, a torturous test of knowledge on the Confucian classics. Sounds easy? Think again. Now picture this, you're a hopeful scholar, head buried in Confucius's greatest hits, dreaming of passing. Well, less than 1% of candidates made the cut. That's right, you had a better chance of getting struck by lightning while winning the ancient lottery. Retakes? Maybe in a few years, if you haven't gone completely bonkers by then. And the stakes? Oh, they were sky high. Your entire village would pawn off their last chicken to bankroll your studies. Pass and you're the local hero. Fail and you're the schmuck who dragged everyone down. No pressure, right? At least in my family, disappointment is a well-established tradition. You know, if I don't pass this, my village is going to sell my house. Oh, that's rough. My village is selling my future wife. Hey, look on the bright side. At least you'll be famous for something. Yeah, as the guy who ruined everyone's life. Wonderful legacy. This wasn't just a mental marathon, it was a full-on mind-body annihilation. Candidates went through hell, experiencing what was charmingly dubbed exam madness. Think never-ending sleepless nights, nerves shot to pieces, and full-on mental breakdowns. Documented cases of extreme outcomes, including self-harm and suicides, paint a grim picture. Scholars buckled under the immense psychological and social pressure. Failure could lead to severe depression and, in some cases, drive them to take their own lives. And don't think being a village disappointment was just a slap on the wrist. Failed scholars often faced being outcast, poverty, and a life of unfulfilled potential. While there's no widespread record of villagers outright killing their failed scholars, the communal pressure was intense enough to ruin lives. So why wouldn't you live long in ancient China? Because proving you were the smartest kid on the block often meant sacrificing your sanity and quite possibly your life in the process. The Taiping Rebellion. Now we're diving into the deadliest conflict you've probably never heard of. Forget World War II's 60 to 85 million deaths, child's play compared to the Taiping Rebellion. This little gem from 1850 to 1864 potentially racked up a staggering 100 million corpses. And guess what? You'd likely be one of them if you had the misfortune of living back then. First up, let's paint the picture. Imagine a 14-year-long civil war in China that makes Game of Thrones look like a playground scuffle. And forget the CGI dragons, this was pure unfiltered rage. On one side, you had the Qing dynasty, an empire run by the Manchu minority who had been pushing China around for 200 years. On the other, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, a bonkers Christian theocracy led by Hong Xiuquan, a guy who decided he was Jesus' kid brother. Yup, the self-proclaimed son of God. You couldn't make this stuff up if you tried. Unless you're my resume, which is a work of pure fiction. This wasn't just any war, it was a marathon of slaughter across 600 cities. Even the most conservative death estimates put the body count at 20 million. That's still more than World War I, the Napoleonic Wars, and the US Civil War combined. And these folks didn't have modern weapons, just swords, starvation, and old-school massacres. So why did this blood-soaked carnival start? Hong Xiuquan, a teacher from the Hakka minority, failed his civil service exams 4 times. That's right, 4. Anyway, after his epic fail, he had what you might call a psychotic break, or a divine vision, depending on who you ask. In his vision, he saw Confucius getting a cosmic spanking for misleading the Chinese people. Hong woke up, declared himself divine, and kicked off a rebellion. Because when life hands you lemons, apparently you declare a holy war. Hong's new Christian movement quickly went from preaching to pillaging. By 1851, his followers had decapitated a Manchu commander, and by 1853, they'd captured Nanking, making it the capital of their heavenly kingdom. Their brand of Christianity was more horror show than holy. Intimacy was banned, even for married couples. But Hong, he lived in a palace with a harem, indulging in orgies. Talk about practicing what you preach. So, Zhang, I had another vision last night.
Oh no, not again. I mean, what divine wisdom did you receive, oh dear heavenly king?
Well, it's as clear as day. I saw a harem of celestial beauties sent to support my divine mission.
Isn't having a harem against your own teachings?
You see, it's called divine exemption, a little perk of being Jesus' little brother.
So, where do I apply for this exemption?
First, you need a vision. Second, you need to fail your civil exams 4 times.
Policy decisions were often made during religious trances, justifying all kinds of atrocities. Meanwhile, civilians were conscripted or starved to death. Intentional starving strategies and the destruction of farmland led to famine, and people started eating each other. Cannibalism wasn't just a last resort, it became an economy. One of the most horrific episodes was the Siege of Anqing in 1861. After 2 years, Qing forces broke in and found an economy based on human meat. Yup, people were literally on the menu. Prices were set for human flesh, and a kilogram fetched about the same as a cheap burger today. Qing soldiers ended the siege by beheading 8,000 surrendered rebels and hauling off over 10,000 women as spoils of war. Bon appetit! Disease played its part too. Cholera outbreaks kept the death toll sky high, and the massacres, both sides treated them like a weekend hobby. Towns razed, civilians slaughtered, mass suicides everywhere, haircuts could be fatal. Rebels grew their hair long in defiance of the Manchu-mandated queue, a single long braid, and chopping it off could mean instant execution. Makes my bad hair days seem like nothing really. The brutality climaxed in 1864 with the fall of Nanking. As Qing forces closed in, Taiping rebels opted for mass suicide over surrender, setting themselves and the city on fire. The Qing then slaughtered the remaining survivors, ending the rebellion with a bloodbath of about 100,000 people in just 3 days. And that, my friends, is a tale of divine delusions, staggering death tolls, and human meat markets. Death by 1,000 cuts. Imagine living in a world where your worst nightmare involves being sliced like a deli ham, but without the promise of a sandwich at the end. Instead, you'd be the unlucky star of a gruesome spectacle known as lynching, or death by 1,000 cuts. This charming execution method wasn't just a creative way to kill time, it was an art form of slow, excruciating dismemberment, designed to turn you into a human jigsaw puzzle, one bloody piece at a time. Starting from around the 10th century and sticking around like an unwanted guest until the early 20th century, lynching was the go-to punishment for major offenses like high treason, mass murder, and of course the heartwarming activities of killing your parents or your boss. I mean, who hasn't thought about that at least once on a Monday morning? But ancient emperors weren't exactly into leniency. They'd sometimes order lynching for just looking at them the wrong way. Wrongful convictions, forced confessions, just another day in paradise. So what did this delightful process entail? Imagine being tied to a wooden frame in a public square, because why suffer in private when you can be the main event? The executioner would then start carving you up, piece by excruciating piece, from your arms, legs, chest, and pretty much everywhere else, until you were left with pieces. If you were lucky, and by lucky I mean incredibly rich or had friends in high places, you might get a mercy slice to the throat or a quick stab to the heart. You know, VIP treatment. Different dynasties had their own spin on this. The Yuan dynasty, fans of efficiency, kept it to a tidy 100 cuts, while the Ming dynasty, those overachievers, reportedly dialed it up to 3,000 cuts.
Hey, how many cuts are we doing today? The usual 1,000?
I heard it's 3,000 for this guy. He messed up big time.
3,000? Oh man, I better pace myself. Last time I cramped up by cut 500.
Careful not to pull a muscle. That would be embarrassing.
Yeah, imagine having to call in sick for an execution.
You see, some emperors even love dragging it out over 3 whole days. Take Liu Jin, a high-flying eunuch who flew too close to the emperor's son. His punishment? A gut-wrenching 3 days of slicing, totaling a staggering 3,300 cuts. Finally, someone who's had a worse week than me. And if that wasn't enough, the locals would even bid for pieces of his flesh to pair with some wine. Bon appetit, anyone? Maybe I should rethink my whining about stubbing my toe. But nah, it still hurts. China's Great Famine. Imagine living in ancient China, dodging plagues, wars, and brutal emperors. Now, think it couldn't get any worse? Enter the 20th century, where death got a whole new makeover. The Communist Party took over in 1949, promising a utopia. Fast forward 10 years, and their idea of paradise was a banquet of famine. Welcome to China's Great Famine from 1958 to 1961. This wasn't some freak accident or bad weather. No, this was a human-made disaster, courtesy of the Communist Party's Great Leap Forward. Spoiler alert, that leap right into a mass grave. They managed to kill off 36 to 45 million people. To put that in perspective, it's like erasing the population of California twice, all in the name of industrialization. Officials stole food from the already starving, claiming it was for the greater good. Yeah, right, and I'm the Easter Bunny.
Remember when we used to eat 3 meals a day?
Yeah, now it's more like 3 days a meal.
I miss rice. I miss flavor. Everything tastes like despair now. Hey, at least we don't have to do dishes.
Oh, worry about what's for dinner.
The answer is always nothing.
The result? 3 years of utter catastrophe. In central Henan province, over 1 million people, 1 in 8, were wiped out by starvation and brutality. In another region, officials demanded more grain than farmers had grown, leading to 12,000 deaths out of 36,000 people in 9 months. Villages turned into ghost towns. One village started with 45 people and ended with just 1 survivor, a woman in her 60s who lost her sanity. Gee, I wonder why. Farmers were beaten, tortured, or buried alive for telling the truth about their harvest or refusing to surrender their meager food, because nothing says patriotism like starving your citizens to death. The famine got so bad that villages piled up with corpses, hundreds at a time, left unattended because, hey, who's counting? And forget dogs, they've been eaten long ago. When you're out of dogs, what's next? Soil, poison, theft, murder, and you guessed it, cannibalism. Thousands of cases of people eating each other just to stay alive. In one village, they killed and ate strangers and even their own children. In one particularly grim tale, a teenage orphan killed and ate her 4-year-old brother. You know, typical sibling rivalry. Families didn't bury their dead, they kept the bodies for later. Well, I guess leftovers take on a whole new meaning here. Corpses were left for mice to gnaw on before humans got to them. By the end of this nightmare, villages were empty, fields stripped bare, trees without bark, and people just memories. The cherry on this horror sundae, the Great Famine is still a taboo topic in China. They call it the 3 years of natural disasters or the 3 years of difficulties. And criticizing the folks in charge? That's still a big no-no. Think surviving ancient China was tough? Wait until you see the spine-chilling traps from the Vietnam War. Discover the horrifying ingenuity behind these deadly devices. You won't believe your eyes. I'll see you there!